In the small waiting room of the local clinic, the air feels heavy despite the faint hum of the air conditioner. A teenage girl sits stiffly in one of the hard plastic chairs, her shoulders hunched and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She keeps shifting her weight, crossing and uncrossing her legs as though she cannot find comfort. Every few seconds, she glances at the door leading deeper into the clinic, then quickly looks away. Her father sits beside her, his posture straighter, his expression a mix of concern and quiet confusion. He has always been protective of his daughter, and today something about her feels different, off in a way he cannot quite explain. She had woken him early in the morning, insisting in a shaky voice that she needed to see a doctor right away. He had asked what was wrong, but she refused to answer directly, only saying that she did not feel well. Now, watching her avoid his eyes and clutch her stomach protectively, he wonders if it is something more serious than a simple illness. The overhead fluorescent lights buzz faintly, casting a pale glow over the room. Other patients sit scattered around, but the girl seems lost in her own world, her breathing shallow and uneven. The father leans toward her, trying to offer reassurance, whispering softly that everything will be fine. But she does not respond, her gaze fixed on the floor tiles, her lips pressed tightly together. There is a tension between them, an invisible wall built from fear and secrets. The father can feel it, and the longer they sit there, the more uneasy he becomes, sensing that whatever brought them here today is far from ordinary. The nurse finally calls their name, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet hallway, and the girl stiffens instantly as though caught doing something wrong. Her father rises first, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, but she hesitates before standing, her legs feeling heavy as if rooted to the floor. With a deep breath, she forces herself to follow him, each step down the narrow corridor seeming to stretch longer than it should. The hallway smells faintly of disinfectant, sterile and sharp, the kind of smell that makes hospitals and clinics feel cold no matter how brightly they are lit. The girl's sneakers squeak faintly against the linoleum, the sound reminding her of how silent everything else feels. When they reach the examination room, the door creaks open, revealing a small space with pale walls, a faintly humming machine in the corner, and a single exam table draped in crinkled white paper. She lingers at the threshold, her eyes darting around nervously as though the room itself hides something threatening. Her father gives her a soft nudge, urging her forward, but she pauses again, glancing up at him with a look that is equal parts fear and pleading. He doesn't understand why she looks so frightened, but he mistakes it for typical anxiety about doctors and tries to encourage her with a quiet smile. She steps inside reluctantly, perching on the edge of the exam table as if ready to flee at any moment. The paper rustles loudly beneath her, breaking the silence. A moment later the doctor enters, clipboard in hand, wearing a reassuring smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He greets them warmly, his voice calm and steady, but he can't help noticing the girl's stiff posture and her hesitant, almost fearful glance. The atmosphere in the small room shifts instantly, polite words on the surface, but underneath, tension coils like a tightly wound spring waiting to snap. The doctor begins with the usual routine, asking simple questions in a calm, practiced voice meant to put patients at ease. He asks when the discomfort started, if there was any pain, nausea, or dizziness. The girl sits rigid on the exam table, her gaze fixed stubbornly on the floor, refusing to meet his eyes. She fidgets with the hem of her sleeve, twisting the fabric between her fingers until it wrinkles, as though the small repetitive motion is the only thing keeping her steady. Her father, watching the silence stretch uncomfortably long, decides to step in. He explains in halting words that she had woken him early in the morning, saying she didn't feel well, and that she'd insisted on coming here. But before he can say more, the girl cuts him off, her voice sharp and unusually tense. She blurts out a few words that don't quite make sense, half answers that avoid the real question, like she's trying to steer the conversation away from something she doesn't want revealed. Her tone is strange, defensive, almost as if she's hiding something. The father looks at her, bewildered, because this isn't how she usually behaves. She's always been quiet, yes, but never evasive like this. The doctor raises his eyebrows slightly, his professional mask slipping just enough to reveal his curiosity. He studies the girl carefully, noting her restless hands, the way her shoulders tighten each time her father speaks, and the tension in her jaw. Something isn't right. Rather than pressing with more questions, he decides on a different approach. His voice is steady, but there's an edge of seriousness as he tells her he'd like to perform a physical examination. The girl's head snaps up for the first time, her eyes wide with unease, and for a brief second, both the doctor and her father see the raw fear in her expression. The girl finally leans back on the exam table, though every movement seems hesitant, as if her body is resisting even as she forces herself to comply. The crisp white paper beneath her crinkles loudly, amplifying the silence in the room. Her hands clutch the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turn pale, and her breathing grows shallow, almost uneven. The father shifts uneasily in the nearby chair, trying to offer a reassuring smile, though his eyes betray the worry gnawing at him. He tells her softly that it will be over quickly, that it's just routine, but she does not respond. Her gaze remains locked on the ceiling tiles, as if counting them to distract herself from what is about to happen. The doctor wheels the ultrasound machine closer, his movements calm and professional, but his eyes flicker briefly to the girl, noting her trembling frame. He explains each step in a soothing voice, squeezing the clear gel onto her abdomen. She flinches immediately, a sharp intake of breath escaping her lips as the coldness spreads across her skin. The doctor gently places the probe against her stomach, moving it slowly, carefully, to minimize discomfort. The hum of the machine fills the room, blending with the faint rhythm of the girl's nervous breaths. Her eyes shift back and forth rapidly between the blank ceiling and the dark monitor screen, as though she's torn between wanting to see what will appear and wanting to avoid it entirely. Every so often, her gaze flickers to her father sitting close by, searching his face for some anchor of reassurance, yet her own expression is one of dread, as if she already knows something neither of them expects. The father notices her unease and leans forward, whispering that everything will be fine, but the look in her eyes tells a different story, one of fear so deep that even his words cannot soothe it. As the ultrasound begins, the room seems to grow smaller, the hum of the machine filling every corner. The doctor's eyes, once calm and detached, now narrow with concentration as he peers at the monitor. Shadows and shapes flicker across the dark screen, and for a moment he says nothing, only adjusting the probe with slow, deliberate movements. The girl swallows hard, her throat dry, her entire body tense beneath his touch. She dares a glance at the monitor, then quickly looks away, her face twisting as if she already knows what he is seeing. Her father leans forward in his chair, his brows furrowed, watching the doctor intently. He doesn't understand the images on the screen, but he notices the shift in the doctor's demeanor, the slight furrow of his brow, the faint pause in his breathing. The doctor moves the probe again, this time slower, tracing carefully as though searching for confirmation. His lips press into a thin line, and he adjusts the machine's settings, the soft beeping punctuating the heavy silence. The girl's eyes glisten with unshed tears, her hand creeping toward her stomach protectively. She trembles as though bracing herself for something inevitable. Her father finally speaks, his voice hesitant, asking if everything is all right. But the doctor doesn't respond right away, his gaze locked on the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. Seconds drag on like hours, the weight of silence growing unbearable. The father shifts uneasily, his heartbeat quickening, while the girl turns her face away, unable to watch. It is in this moment, in the doctor's tense posture and the girl's frightened stillness, that the atmosphere changes completely, from a routine checkup to something far more unsettling. The doctor's face tightens as he studies the screen again, and suddenly the calm professionalism he carried into the room begins to crack. His shoulders stiffen, his hand gripping the ultrasound probe just a little too firmly. He slides it across the girl's abdomen once more, slower this time, almost as if he doesn't trust what he is seeing. The flickering image remains, steady and undeniable, and the color drains from his face. His lips part slightly, but no words come out, only a quiet exhale that makes the silence heavier. The father notices immediately, his eyes darting between the screen and the doctor's expression. Something is wrong, he can feel it. He leans forward, his voice tight with worry, asking what's going on. But the doctor doesn't answer, his focus locked, his movements precise, trying to confirm the truth with each angle. The girl lies perfectly still, her body rigid, but her eyes betray her. She blinks rapidly, tears beginning to well as if she's been waiting for this moment, dreading it all along. Her hand grips the side of the table, nails pressing into the paper beneath her. The father asks again, his tone louder now, tinged with fear, demanding to know if his daughter is all right. Still, the doctor hesitates, caught between his duty to explain and the shock of what he's uncovered. For a long, suffocating moment, no one speaks. The only sounds are the soft hum of the machine and the uneven breaths of the girl. Finally, unable to bear it, she turns her face away from them both, hot tears slipping down her cheeks, as though she already knows the answer her father desperately seeks but is not yet ready to hear. After what feels like an eternity, the doctor gently removes the probe and sets it aside, wiping the gel from the girl's skin with a soft towel. His movements are slow, deliberate, as if buying himself a few more seconds to gather his thoughts. The room is thick with tension, the silence pressing down heavier than before. The father, unable to stay quiet any longer, leans forward sharply and demands an explanation, his voice trembling between anger and fear. The doctor finally looks up, his expression grave, and clears his throat. His eyes flick briefly toward the girl before settling back on the father. In a carefully measured tone, he asks the father if he might step outside for a few minutes so that he can speak with the girl privately. The request lands like a hammer in the quiet room. The father stares at him in disbelief, shaking his head, insisting he has a right to know what is happening with his own child. The girl's breathing quickens, her chest rising and falling rapidly as her eyes dart between them. She whispers softly, almost pleading, telling her father to listen to the doctor. Her voice is so fragile that it silences him for a moment. Reluctantly, he stands, his hands balled into fists at his sides, fighting against the urge to refuse. He lingers at the door, casting one last worried glance back at his daughter. She won't meet his gaze. Instead, she stares at the floor, her shoulders trembling. The doctor assures him quietly that he will explain everything soon, but the tone in his voice is far from comforting. With a heavy sigh, the father steps out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind him. Inside, the girl grips the edge of the exam table so tightly that her knuckles turn white, her body rigid with the weight of whatever truth she knows is about to be spoken aloud. The room feels colder now that the father has stepped outside, the air heavy with unspoken dread. The doctor pulls up a stool and sits beside the girl, lowering his voice to something gentle but serious. He begins asking her questions, not the routine ones from earlier, but direct and urgent, his eyes fixed on her pale face. At first, she refuses to answer, her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes darting to the closed door as though hoping her father might suddenly return and end the conversation. The silence stretches unbearably until the doctor leans a little closer, reminding her that he needs the truth if he is to help her. Her chest rises and falls quickly, her hands clutching at the crumpled paper beneath her, and finally she whispers a few words so softly they are almost inaudible. The doctor freezes, his eyes widening, the calm mask slipping from his face. He asks her to repeat herself, needing to be sure he heard correctly. This time her voice breaks, the words tumbling out in a shaky confession that fills the small room with a chilling weight. The doctor glances back at the monitor, then at her stomach, as if trying to connect the pieces, his disbelief written all over his face. He mutters something under his breath, half to himself, before turning back to her, his tone urgent now, asking follow-up questions. She nods weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks, confirming what he dreaded. For a moment, he just sits there, staring at her with a mixture of shock and sympathy, knowing that what she has revealed is not only life-changing for her, but something her father outside the door is completely unprepared to hear. The silence that follows is suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the ultrasound machine still running in the background, a haunting reminder of what they both now know. In the hallway outside the exam room, the father paces back and forth, his footsteps echoing faintly against the linoleum floor. Each second drags on longer than the last, his mind racing with questions he cannot answer. He presses his ear against the thin wall, straining to catch even a fragment of what the doctor and his daughter might be saying, but the muffled voices are too faint, swallowed by the humming fluorescent lights above. His palms are damp with sweat, and he wipes them against his trousers, his heart thudding so loudly he can almost hear it. He feels powerless, something a father should never feel when it comes to protecting his child. He keeps replaying the events of the morning in his head, the urgency in her voice, the fear in her eyes, the way she avoided every question he asked. None of it makes sense, and the longer he waits, the more convinced he becomes that something is terribly wrong. A nurse passes by, her shoes squeaking softly against the floor, and notices his restless pacing. She slows, offering a polite but cautious smile, and asks if he's all right. He forces a nod, though his voice catches when he says he's just waiting. She gives a sympathetic glance toward the exam room door before continuing down the hall, leaving him once again in silence. He runs his hands over his face, trying to steady his breathing, but every instinct inside him screams that his daughter is hiding something the doctor now knows. He stares at the closed door as though sheer willpower might force it open, every second deepening his dread. The longer he waits, the stronger the feeling grows that when that door finally opens, the world as he knows it will never be the same again. The door finally creaks open, and the father spins around instantly, his chest tightening with anticipation. The doctor steps out first, his usually composed face pale and drawn, his eyes shadowed with the weight of what he has just learned. Behind him, the girl sits on the edge of the exam table, shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed on the floor as though she can't bear to look up. The father rushes forward, his voice breaking as he demands to know what is happening, what the doctor found. But the doctor hesitates, glancing back at the girl, then at the father, as though caught in an impossible dilemma. His silence feels louder than words, and it only fuels the father's desperation. He repeats his question, louder now, his hand trembling as it grips the doorframe. The girl's small, shaky breath cuts through the tension, and she finally looks up at him with red-rimmed eyes. For a split second, the room seems frozen, everyone suspended in the moment between revelation and collapse. The doctor clears his throat, starting to speak, but his words falter, and instead he turns slightly toward the girl, silently urging her to be the one to explain. The father's heart pounds as he looks between them, searching their faces for answers. The girl lowers her head again, unable to hold his gaze, and that silence, her refusal to speak, strikes him harder than any words could. The truth hangs there, heavy and suffocating, filling the space between them with dread. The father realizes with growing terror that whatever lies behind his daughter's strange behavior, whatever the doctor has seen on that monitor, is far more serious than anything he had imagined. And as the weight of it settles in the room, none of them move, the air thick with a secret that has changed everything.